What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Early Read Week 4 betting preview. We bring on a good friend of the show, Duck. Duck returns at StepOnaDuck on Twitter. He does some work for the Action Network, especially in the FCS ranks. Duck was on the Week 0/Week 1 pod. We were chatting up, what was it? Delaware State, Montana State. Feels like it was so long ago already, but we are into Week 4. We have some conference play starting in earnest. Still a few non-con games, but I'm most interested in a few conference debuts for some of these realignment teams. We're talking USC going to the Big House. Tennessee takes the trip to Norman to welcome Oklahoma into SEC play, and Utah. We're going to talk about their injury situation, how they will do in their Big 12 opener against Oklahoma State. Loaded show. We're going to do some my guy, not my guy talks in Week 3. Also, loaded show. Duck, thanks for coming back on. How's it going, man?
Doing great. Season's in full swing, man. Already Week 4, it goes just that quick. And so, like you said, really excited for teams to finish up non-conference play, and some are firing up conference play, and conference realignment is in full swing. So it's going to be real interesting this week for sure.
Yeah, before we recorded, I know earlier, we're recording this on Monday night. Earlier today, there's a Air Force as a target of the AAC for realignment. And then I saw a fake Pete Thamel tweeted, Memphis might go to the Pac-12 now and like their rebuilt stuff, which someone got on Twitter because I saw it retweeted, and like it was like at not Pete Thamel or someone on Twitter, and someone just completely got duped. But that's there are games to be played though. We're going to talk about that. But before we talk some Week 4, let's talk some Week 3 with some my guy, not my guy. Duck, I'll let you go first. Let's start positive. Who is your guy of the Week 3 slate?
So I want to preface this with Nebraska, right? So they've had offensive woes for years. They've struggled in the red zone. The turnovers have cost them games. Their fans have been really restless. And so there was a focus in the offseason on really being more explosive on offense. And they brought in Dylan Raiola, and it's gone pretty well. But there has been a distinct staunch in style and play calling and urgency in the second half. We've seen it in all 3 games. When they played UTEP, they shut it down late in the third quarter. And in the Colorado game, they did the same thing. They scored at will in the first half and then completely shut it down. Same thing in this UNI game this past weekend. They were minus 30.5. They scored touchdowns on their first 3 drives, and the route was on. And then all of a sudden, you start to see this change in play calling from the OC, and the decision-making by Matt Rule is just super strange in the second half. They kick field goals on 4th and 1 from the 7. They go for it on 4th and 14 from the 18, and they're just doing some strange things. I say that because I was on Nebraska minus 30.5. They're up 27-3. The game is well in hand. There's 5 minutes to go, and they're running out the clock. My guy of the week this week was Nebraska backup running back Emmett Johnson. So Emmett Johnson splits carries. He's kind of a rotational back. He gets some third down action. But again, we've seen Matt Rule do this now 3 times in a row where there was just no urgency to pour it on in the second half, which is surprising. Their fans don't like that. So Emmett Johnson comes off, and he pops off a long 27-yard pass reception on 3rd and 7 to extend the drive. He breaks a tackle. And then later on in the drive, with 4 minutes remaining on 3rd and 4, bam, 36-yard touchdown to get in front of the number and make everybody in Lincoln happy. For the game, he had 4 rushes for 50 yards and 3 pass receptions for 43 yards. He scored late to get the cover despite, again, the extremely conservative nature of the play calling in the second half, which totally changes the rhythm of their games. But not to worry, because my guy was on it. Emmett Johnson from Nebraska.
And it's funny you bring that up, because not my guy in Week 1 for me was Matt Rule, because he was putzing around late in the game. I had the over, I want to say 47.5 or something against UTEP. There was a 4th and goal he didn't get. He didn't kick another time. So I'm happy for you that maybe to the expense of Matt Rule, Emmett Johnson was able to house one. I've had 2 of those already this year where guys are getting like some garbage time, like completely out of it. 3rd stringer, 2nd stringers, whatever, housing a touchdown in like kneel down scenarios almost. So I'm glad you got that one home. I didn't have many my guys. We're going to talk about my week in a little bit, especially during the not my guy segment. But my guy, it was a team I was high on going into the year because of their coach, Curt Cignetti. The first preview I had of the entire early read off-season preview or preseason preview was the Big Ten. And I put my foot in the ground. And I said, Indiana over 5 wins. They're going bowling for sure. Bowling at minimum. This team could flirt with, I think, 7, 8 wins. And it's nice to see that it's coming to fruition quite quickly. They haven't had the most tough schedule yet, but I pegged this game against UCLA as a slam spot. Came in really short. They absolutely, from opening kickoff, that game was not in doubt. That was a wire-to-wire beatdown by the Hoosiers. This team, I said, look, they're not like Big Ten competitive on that scale with the Ohio States and the Oregons, but when you look at that middle, they're right there with it, and they were being priced as if they were one of the worst teams. They were much closer to the upper middle of that league, and they look just like it. Rourke looks healthy. I love Elijah Surratt at wide receiver. They got something with a D. I'm drawing a blank on his last name, but he came back from injury. Shout out to him for me forgetting his name. But the defense is physical. This is a team that I'm eyeing in these coin flip type scenarios as Big Ten play keeps up, because there are some games where it's going to be we'll see how crazy the market gets on them, but there's games against Michigan State, Washington, Purdue. These are games where they're going to be small favorites. I think they're much better than these teams, and it's looking like I was proven right on that. So Curt Cignetti took his team across the country to the Rose Bowl and absolutely laid it down on UCLA.
Yeah, and I've got it in my notes to discuss tonight. Indiana has been a real pleasant surprise. Not that I thought they were going to be bad, but that preseason win total market did not price in how motivated Curt Cignetti was to do it at this level. He's doing it with his guys. And so the guys that he brought over from JMU have bought into the culture, which has really helped expedite that ramp up period for people to really buy in there. Indiana's been on my card all 3 weeks this year, and it's been a pleasant surprise. And like you said, right from the opening kickoff, there was absolutely no doubt who the better team was at UCLA. And honestly, if you've got over 5 in pocket, I mean, spend the money, because they're going to win at least 8 games. In fact, I'll make a bold prediction here. They may only lose 2 games. I mean, maybe Nebraska. I think they'll beat Michigan this year. And then at Ohio State will be one of those things where you might be looking at Indiana to maybe sneak into that Big Ten championship game if they really pull a shocker. But they are a really, really good football team, and I'm not stepping in front of that train.
No, they kind of took their foot off the gas in week 1 against FIU. That game, that was one of the late touchdowns I got to cover some early numbers, some good numbers on Indiana. But Western Illinois, or whatever Illinois they played, I don't know, they got blown off the face of the earth. So I don't even know if they're a part of Illinois anymore. They won, I think it was like 77-3. And then again, UCLA, that game was a bona fide ass kicking. Just some numbers. EPA per play, they ranked in the 93rd percentile relative to games last year, 90th percentile in success rate. This team, the schedule was pretty favorable, I thought, and I thought that this team was one I wanted to buy upside on, because, again, you go through that schedule, and Duck, you were just mentioning it, there's not that many amazing teams on that schedule where if Indiana plays a little bit above their preseason rating, they're going to be in those games pretty quickly. So Indiana's a team I bought early, and they've made me some decent coin early in the year, so I'm pumped about that. What about someone that you want to blow some steam off at after last week's performance? Who's not your guy of the week?
Not my guy of the season up to this point. I made some financial investments based on this offseason get in the transfer portal, but Grayson McCall from NC State, right?
Yeah, it's not happening.
9 pass completions against a Swiss cheese defense of Louisiana Tech for only 54 yards, was benched in the second half. They said he was hurt, but they went to the true freshman backup who led the comeback against Louisiana Tech. And Grayson McCall, only 476 yards passing and 44 rushing games this year through 3 games up to this point. He was one of the most heralded offseason transfer pickups in the portal. There was a lot of buzz around NC State. They did a Heisman campaign for him out in Raleigh. That was maybe a little bit too far, but the ACC futures were flowing. The win totals were flowing, and I have not been impressed up to this point by any stretch of the imagination. With all the dudes they have on offense, Waters and KC Concepcion and a veteran offensive line, this offense should be humming, and we haven't seen it against Western Carolina. We certainly didn't see it against Tennessee. And last week against Louisiana Tech, despite the final score, that was really in the balance in the fourth quarter. And had Louisiana Tech not thrown a pick six and had 4 drives that crossed midfield that resulted in 0 points, it could be 1 and 2 for Wolfpack. So GMC, one other sentiment I have, I'm fearing that this is playing out with Grayson McCall, who I thought was a major dude at Coastal Carolina, but he is seeming to be purely a systematic talent, and it's playing out before our very eyes that they ran that quirky offense with Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina that he flourished in, but a more traditional offense that we see more common to the game of football, and he looks very average.
So I agree with you. As someone who bet NC State over 8.5 at plus money, I was pretty pumped about that one because the schedule was pretty favorable and looks like they're running into some trouble early here. I will say I'm curious, and we'll talk maybe some Clemson NC State a little bit later. That number is now massive, but do you think that maybe this NC State season might play out similar to how it did last season? Because if you remember at the beginning of last season, they really, really struggled with Brennan Armstrong. And this is an offensive system that I really liked with Robert and I. A defense, obviously, very solid. They lose Peyton Wilson this season, but that was an NC State team. If I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe they started like 3-3 or something, and then they got red hot down the stretch. They included an upset win over Clemson at home. I wonder if this team, and again, maybe I'm wrong for just pairing just because it's the same team 2 years in a row with different old quarterbacks, and Armstrong ended up finishing the season, but do you think that this team is maybe just slow starting? Maybe this team just doesn't have the talent necessarily right away to thrive early in the transfer portal era? I'm more like thinking out loud.
Well, they definitely have the talent. And honestly, defensively, they haven't really played that bad, right? Against Western Carolina, they were kind of in a dogfight. The offense turned the ball over a little bit and kind of put the defense out there in bad situations. And against Louisiana Tech, given the circumstances, the defense didn't really play that bad. Defense has not been the problem.
Yeah.
Now, the Tennessee game kind of got away from them after the pick six, right? It's 14-10, and North Carolina State's going down to punch one, or maybe it was 14-7 at that point, and they throw a 95-yard pick six to put the game out of reach, and then they fumble on the next possession, and then it's 28-7 or whatever in the blink of an eye, and they just couldn't recover. I'm not giving them
just to cut you off there. And listen, I'm a Tennessee truther. I'm on Team Tennessee. The box score probably doesn't match that score line. Tennessee only had 460 total yards. That's typically not a 51-point outing. So the defense didn't. Look, Tennessee also, they could have taken their foot off the gas. The game got away from them. But I'm just saying, we're both on something that maybe don't pour all the dirt on NC State just yet. Grayson McCall, maybe not the entire team.
So much so that I have a North Carolina State ticket in pocket this weekend. And
should we just talk about that game now? Just segue into it?
If you want, yeah, we can just jump in and give a quick cliff notes on it anyway.
Yeah, because I was thinking of betting NC State. I was going to wait for a 21 to pop in full, but I bet under in the game. I wonder if you see it the same way.
I think that the Clemson offensive woes are real, and I do not believe that 56-point first half ass kicking at home against App State when they were blowing off steam from a terrible Georgia performance that I kind of predicted early in the offseason that they would really struggle against Georgia. That App State performance does not fix the problems, right? App State does not have ACC athletes, and they don't have the trench play to get pressure on Klubnik, which NC State could potentially do is provide a little pressure there and make him have to make some off-balance throws. And I'm not sold that Clemson is just going to absolutely blast this team. Now that Grayson McCall's not starting this week and it's going to be freshman quarterback, I could see the game plan for NC State being very methodical, slow-paced, find a way to lean on their dude running back Waters and keep the Clemson offense on the sideline and really kind of just hang in that game, right? 19 is a ton of points. And if they do want to give themselves a chance in the second half to be competitive, I think they have to play keep away. And I think that they have the trench play on the offensive line to be able to be successful with doing that. Clemson still has an elite defensive line in the grand scheme of college football, but they're not the best D-line in the country, and they don't have, without using the NIL and the transfer portal, which they do not do, they're the only team in the country that has not taken a transfer this offseason. I just don't see their team being one that is going to blow out NC State And honestly, I don't see him scoring a lot of points either. So the only way I would play the total on this one is an under. I could see a 27-14 type of game.
Yeah.
24-14.
So let's go back just 1 year. 1 year, Clemson takes the trip down to Raleigh. They face NC State. 24-17 in favor of the Wolfpack in that game. In that game, Clemson had 364 total yards. NC State only had 202, and they won the game 24-17. Starting freshman quarterback CJ Bailey, I think that he's pretty dynamic, but I think Dave Doran's going to say, we're going to try and play keep away. We're going to play field position. This 3-3-5 defense, I still think can give Cade Klubnik some issues in this game. Even at home, I don't trust that Clemson. This is some explosive offense. I agree with you, Duck, 100%. I think that 66-point outburst against App State is a bit in one direction. The 3-point game against Georgia is also in the other direction. I'm sure that they're somewhere in the middle. I still don't think that this is a super explosive offense. I think NC State, this defense has proven it can slow down this iteration of Clemson. Maybe Clemson wins pretty handedly. I don't think that this game is some shootout, though. I don't think NC State wants to be a shootout, and I don't think Clemson's built to make it a shootout. So I think somewhere in the neighborhood of Clemson in the mid to low 20s, NC State in the mid to low teens, and this is kind of just like a routine Clemson win. I won't go for the outright upset.
Yep, same sentiments here.
Yeah. So we ended same place. The 21 didn't pop. If a 21 pops, I'm really going to consider it, but I went for the under. I just think that maybe if the chance that NC State's offense just really can't get into gear and Clemson maybe just like kind of leans on them a little much, almost in a sense of the Georgia Clemson game where the field position battle was just like too skewed against Clemson that they almost couldn't handle it. I'm also a little concerned it is a freshman, first start on the road, Death Valley. That's where I get a little iffy on the game. It could go sideways pretty quickly for him.
Yeah, it'll help in the environment being a noon game. It's not a night game in Death Valley. So, yeah, that'll help too for NC State. Maybe a little bit of Clemson sleepwalk. It'll be interesting. Yeah, there's a lot that happened in week 3, though. If you want to recap a little week 3, there was a lot of great football played.
Well, let me do my not my guy. That was a nice little segue. And then it also leans into another week 4 game that I want to work. So this is a good segue here. So really quick, not my guy. I wasn't part of the Virginia Tech love before the season. I thought good team, but I thought the market was pretty out on them. This team isn't very good at all. This team is like flat out mid. Kyron Jones, I was concerned he couldn't throw. He definitely can't. And how about this defense that was like at the top of all the returning production ranks? They have this defensive-minded coach and Brent Pry taking serious strides. This defense is terrible, and not my guy of the week is Brent Pry. On the Monday show, I gave out under 50.5 against Old Dominion. That was before Old Dominion's quarterback was ruled out. So I'm sitting there like, oh, here we go. Wasn't even part of the handicap. Total drops to 47.5, was already trending in that direction. So I have a good number in pocket. Vodtech lets up an 80-yard touchdown run to Old Dominion in the first half, and I go, oh, we're in trouble now. And then, end of the game, I'm saying there, okay, just no touchdown, and we get home. Vodtech with Colin Schleien settles for a field goal. There's about like 5 minutes left, and I'm like, all right, I'm having a really shitty day. We could get this one out real quick. Just don't let ODU go the length of the field. One ODU punt, and we're home. ODU immediately in 2 minutes goes the length of the field in garbage time to send the game over the total. I couldn't believe it. So not my guy of the week, Brent Pry. And Duck, before I wrap it into Vodtech Rutgers, I think that's a super interesting game between two teams that maybe are going in different directions. Want to quickly talk about my weekend as a whole. So week 2, have a banner week. Great for the pod. Great for everything. Plus like almost 10-unit week. Really like one of my best weeks ever. So I feel great there. Don't get too high or too low or anything, but it was a pretty crappy card of non-conference games. And I said in the week 1 preview, I always seem to talk myself into the underdog playing up to competition, especially in non-conference play where the talent level is pretty large. The talent deficit between the two teams or gap. And I guess this last week, I kind of talked myself into a bunch of dogs that maybe as fades of the the Power Four team that they were playing. I'm talking about Tulsa. I'm talking about Nevada. I'm talking about even Middle Tennessee against a higher class Conference USA team. Teams that I thought maybe I was onto something, and maybe I was onto something on the better team, the favorite, and it got smacked right back in my face. I had a negative 13 unit week. I went back and looked in my 5 years of doing this pretty seriously, my worst week. And it sucks. I put my own money on this. And it also, shout out to the Tailgate Tent who he tweeted that he listens to the show and it's in the rotation. It was almost like a kiss of death for that one. Once I get some new listeners, some new followers, a crappy week on the way. But, I looked at the card and I even tweeted. It seemed like it was like I bet on a bunch of dog shit teams and I got dog shit results. So, went back on a few of principles I thought I had learned and it sucked. And now, I got my work cut out for me to make it back and, whatever, but that's why we keep grinding. But, obviously a few new listeners, and it's also funny. I had my best CLV week of the season so far. So had the best market agreement, worst results, which is always funny. But, I don't claim to be the end all be all. I hope people that listen don't think I give off that persona. I'm trying to learn. I bring on smart people. I try to give my analysis, and sometimes you get plus 9 unit weeks. And then sometimes in 7 days later, you get negative 13 unit weeks. So, it sucked and it's never fun, but you move on and we got a whole new week. So, Duck, if you have anything to say on that, or we could talk some Rutgers Vodtech and get back into it.
I do. So, and I'll just say too, I know your off-season prep and I know your week-to-week prep. And so while you don't guarantee that every bet's going to be a winner, you certainly put in the research. And for all your listeners out there, I would really encourage anybody who is taking your actionable advice. It's kind of like a stock or an investment portfolio where there can be some volatility week to week in a particular security, and there can be some unsettling times, but you've really got to zoom out in order to get perspective, right? I'm not going to sell a stock if it drops 3 or 4% in a week, and I'm not going to dump somebody that I trust their opinion on if they have a bad week, right? Over the long haul, you're going to be profitable. Over the long haul, you know what you're doing. Your bets are backed by solid research. And so for anybody who would be apprehensive, I would say, let's zoom out, right? Let's take it into perspective. If you do this for any length of time, I've been betting on college football for 18 years, you're going to have bad weeks. It's just kind of part of the territory. You're betting on 18 to 22-year-old kids that play a sport with an oblong-shaped football. So the bounces aren't going to go your way all the time, but you're certainly doing the work and the research. And so I would say that anybody listening should kind of keep that in perspective. There's going to be highs, there's going to be lows. How you can properly manage your bankroll and how you can properly manage your emotions are going to be key in kind of weathering the storm.
Yeah. And honestly, this was one where it obviously sucked and I was pissed, but you kind of just gotta roll with it. You gotta just be like, it sucks. It's really annoying, but it is what it is. And that's why we move on to this week, and we'll see if we can bounce back. So let's talk some Rutgers Vodtech as we turn the page to week 4. So still a non-conference game. So again, I kind of just voiced my opinion on Vodtech. I don't think this team is very good. I don't know how good Rutgers is though. And I do wonder, where can Rutgers get? And so let me first preface by saying the point spread on this one, because there has been some early action on Rutgers. You have Vodtech, let's call it the FanDuel number, 3.5, total 46.5. So my first lean, and I didn't bet anything in this game yet, but I wrote down under, and it was bet up from 40.5. So this was now, it opened 40.5, and I was like, no, thank you. Now it's at 45.5, 46.5 even juiced at FanDuel. I do wonder, is Rutgers defense going to put this Vodtech team in a box, and this game is going to be an absolute mess?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the Rutgers MO when they play in conference, and especially when they play up. And so you saw it last year against Michigan and Ohio State, where they run the football. They have an attitude on the offensive and defensive trench where they fire off and they get pressure and they move the line of scrimmage and they lean into their run game. And I love everything about Rutgers football. I have a Rutgers ticket in pocket this week, +5, and they're in my money line round robin. And
I like that as well.
Fully confident that Rutgers is going to go in there. I think this game is going to mean a lot more to the State University of New Jersey than it is Virginia Tech. And I don't think Virginia Tech is very good. I think Rutgers is one of those teams that is actually pretty good. In fact, when you look at the slate for Rutgers, there's not a lot of games that they can't win, and they are vastly improved in almost all facets. They play exceptional special teams. They have very sound defense. Their corners are big and physical. The one bugaboo with Rutgers that would give me pause, again, one of those things where I'm not going to guarantee any play is a winner, but backing our plays with research, the one struggle for Rutgers is they cannot pass the football.
Not at all. Not in the slightest.
And the transfer quarterback from Minnesota, he has a Greek name, and I don't even want to try to pronounce it because
Kaligmanis.
Yes,
the Greek rifle.
That's right. He was a little better against Akron, and I don't want people to just laugh at that, because while Akron is a bottom team in FBS and a bottom 2 or 3 team in the MAC, Akron has a stout defense, and they played very well against Ohio State, despite what that final ended up being. I mean, it was a test, and they did play better in the pass game, but I would really hope that Rutgers can find themselves living in third and short. They have to have success on first down and second down running the football. I think that the clock will bleed. I think they will play the possession game and the field position game. I trust their special teams. And really, it'll be about which team makes a massive mistake in the second half that could ultimately determine the cover. But I think this game's a coin flip. I think the spread being what it was to open, I had no choice but to take Rutgers. And I think Rutgers is the better team, and certainly will be in position for them. Defense is going to really just wreak havoc against Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech has a quarterback that I just have zero confidence in.
So to me, I would like to have 4. I don't need 5. 4.5 would be really nice. But I would lean towards Rutgers now. Now it's 3.5, so it's a little bit of a different story. Low total. But what sticks out to me on this Virginia Tech team is, A, they can't throw. The team is really struggling. They're 83rd in passing success rate this season. Drones really is struggling. And he can move, though. He's a gigantic quarterback, so he can really run. But Rutgers is a great, stout defensive team in terms of tackling, really, really disciplined on the defensive side of the ball. Where I see a real edge, though, in this game is Virginia Tech's inability to stop the run. I was just talking about it before with Old Dominion. Old Dominion ripped off an 85-yard touchdown. Old Dominion went right down the field. Granted, garbage time, but still, it all adds up. Virginia Tech, 94th in EPA per rush this season. And it's not like they're playing a murderer's row of teams. They played Vandy, who they lost to. They played to Marshall. They played Marshall, and then they played Old Dominion. It's not like they played a murderer's row. And I'm not saying Rutgers anything, but I'll tell you what, Kyle Monungai is the best player that Virginia Tech has faced this season. So I do think that Virginia Tech may run into issues here. And it's just a team that I don't trust. I've watched now this team continue to underperform week after week now. This is 3 weeks in a row. And I know they beat up on an Old Dominion team without their quarterback, but I just can't trust this team. So again, maybe my only play here will be like Rutgers in a money line round robin, like bet on the variance, opposed to taking the points right now. But I completely agree with you. To me, this is Rutgers or pass, and definitely a lean towards the under, because I don't know which offense is really ripping off explosives here.
Well, and what I would want to do is I would want to refer back to the Virginia Tech opener against Vanderbilt, right? Rutgers runs the ball 2-to-1 split. So 66% of their offensive plays this year have been rushing plays, and they are a team that leans on their run game and they don't deviate from it. Look what Vandy was able to do. 371 yards. They leaned on the run game. They got out to, I think, 17-0 or 20-0 lead in that game.
And then Va-Tech, because I was watching the game, they fell so far behind. They need to start playing like just chucking football, just really okay, let's try and out athlete these guys down the field. And Jerome started just chucking. And that's how Va-Tech got back into the game. But I don't think that's really their MO on offense. They don't want to do that. It's pretty evident.
Well, they're not going to be able to do it against Rutgers.
Yeah, exactly.
Rutgers defense, and especially the front seven, is so stout, and they play such sound football, and they don't make mistakes. I think this is a game that Rutgers will control the action rather than the other way around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that was one of the games I want to talk about, so I'm glad we got it in. Before we talk about the rest of the slate, let's talk about Rithmm, the sponsor for today's show. Rithmm is an AI-generated sports betting app that lets you create your own sports betting models on any sport of the major sports. You got NFL, NCAA. They have a golf betting model for when this fall season picks back up. NBA season around the corner, you can do that, as well as college basketball. My pressure run rate on totals has been absolutely crushing. 22-9-1 on the season, 71% hit rate. Get in on Rithmm. Make sure you use the promo code in the podcast description below to get started. Make sure you sign up for Rithmm today. It supports the show, support Rithmm, and yeah, go Rithmm. So let's talk some USC-Michigan. USC, their Big Ten debut, they go to the Big House to face the defending national champions. Obviously, things have changed quite a bit for both these teams going into the year. Whether you predicted it or not, I think Michigan has been worse than you could have ever imagined. Really just no sense of offense here. They are going to start Alex Orji in this game, the run-first quarterback that seemingly lost his job in the fall camp, losing it to Davis Warren, who is probably going to be selling insurance somewhere. They now host a USC team that I'm still pumping my brakes on. They only played 2 games so far. They beat LSU in the Vegas game, and then they smoked Utah State, who's not very good. I'm not sold all the way that this Miller Moss-led offense is so dynamic. I still think that there is some concern. I know that there's a lot of wide receiver play, and I know that this team is, has as good of a play caller as possible. The numbers look gaudy against LSU, but I'm not sold all the way. He's not as mobile. He took some pressure. He's facing an elite defense in his first true road start of his career. I'm just not sold that it's going to be such easy pickings here. That being said, on the other side, Duck, I think Texas got the game plan out on how to beat this Michigan team. And I do think USC can do similar things to Texas. No, you're not going to be able to run the ball up the middle. No, you're not going to be able to go to that defensive line. But what you can do is quick little tunnel screens out to the left, quick underneath throws to the tight end, get the ball out quickly, which I think Miller Moss can do, and get the ball going downfield, put the ball in space, avoid Will Johnson, Michigan stud corner, and you can move the ball methodically because if you get to 17 points, I'm pretty sure you're going to win this game 75, 80% of the time.
Yeah, I was just going to say the only way I could really play this is the under. I think that when you just go back and reference the opening line this week, which was USC -7, and it sat at 7 for several hours. So a Michigan +7 could have been had. In the preseason, this was Michigan -9. And so you have this perception that's been such heavily swung the other way on the pendulum with the USC win against LSU in Las Vegas, and then they blew out Utah State, as you alluded to.
Yeah.
And then you've got Michigan with the really embarrassing loss at Texas. I mean, they just were not in it. And I'm not sure I really want to penalize Michigan that much. Look what Texas has done against everybody else. I mean, they are just blasting everybody, and there's no resistance and there's no stopping it. And so I think that it's really hard to penalize Michigan for what we saw in that one. They looked great for a couple of quarters against Arkansas State before letting a couple of late touchdowns kind of ruin that one for Michigan. A game I didn't really see much of.
So I had a Michigan buddy over, so I told him, because the noon slate was so crappy, he could get a screen. So I actually watched more Michigan Arkansas State than I'm probably proud to admit. This Davis Warren is no good. They actually, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, but they went to Orji in the second half. They gave him a drive, and he actually hit a play action down the field shot. I wouldn't say it was pretty, but it led to a touchdown. And my Michigan fan friend, who I respect his knowledge on the team, he goes, that was our best drive of the entire season. So I actually think that they had to go to Orji.
Yeah, and maybe he brings the element that they need in order to kind of maybe start to get it clicking. I mean, obviously the metrics and the personnel talent show that Michigan is way down compared to last year.
Yeah.
They just lost so much talent on offense, defense, and special teams. And coaching staff is different, and there's been some offseason distractions. And so there's a lot of balls in the air that they're juggling, right? They're adding another piece now with a new quarterback, and eventually you either keep all the balls in the juggling rhythm or you start dropping them. And so it'd be real interesting to see what happens here. But I don't know, man. This is a spot that I have a feeling Michigan had circled in red ink at the beginning of the season as one of those games that they really want to bring their A game for. And tough spot for USC, probably the toughest spot of the season so far for USC. And so for them to go on the road, and now it's about 5, but I couldn't lay it. I could not lay it with USC.
So I bet the under 46.5 on the news that Orji was going to play. Still available. I still like it. I think that when you look at what Michigan's going to do They can't move the ball explosively. I think that USC has made a pretty significant upgraded defensive coordinator in D'Anton Lynn, probably going to stack the box, trust USC secondary, which I still think has some issues, to limit Michigan's pretty mediocre to below par group of pass catchers. So I don't think Michigan's going to get much on the passing game. I think they're really just going to lean on their run game, use Orji as a runner, try and pound the rock, try and move the ball on the ground, play field position, remake the Texas game plan. That game plan against Texas, it didn't work, but it did keep Texas at bay just a little bit. And I rate Texas offense higher than USC's. That total against Texas, the Michigan-Texas game, close 41.5. So I do think directionally this is going to be bet down given the pace, given Miller Moss in his first true road setting. And I said this when Texas played Michigan. I believe Sarkisian is going to keep this buttoned up and avoid giving Michigan a head of steam, give Michigan any sort of momentum. We watched Texas early in that game, move down the field methodically, quick passing game. The run game didn't work, immediately went to the quick passing game, and they pulled ahead and they didn't look back. I think USC is going to follow suit with simple, efficient passes, spread this Michigan defense out, avoid going at that vaunted front with Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, and try and spread them out and move down the field methodically and get out of here with a workmanlike win. I think it's got to be under here, and I think it's going to move that way throughout the week.
Well, the other thing at play, too, is the cat's kind of out of the bag, right? Earlier in the offseason, the questions were and the perception on USC was still that their defense stinks, but not really so. I mean, first couple of games of the season have been under games for USC, and they've pretty well played lockdown defense. And so I think that in this particular game as well, the only thing that you could do is possibly do is play the under.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, too, where even if teams resort to the quick passing game with the clock changes that were effective last year, the clock doesn't stop after a first down. And so even if you do have teams that are pass heavy, if it's dink and dunk, that still is a scheme that really chews clock when you're completing short passes. They almost act as short run plays. And at this point, I think you'll see a max effort from Michigan. I think you'll see them come up with something that they can do in order to kind of give themselves a chance. But under is the only way and I would probably, based on how close the game is, and there is a potential likelihood that overtime could ruin that, I would try to find a first half under 23.5 or 24, and I'd play a first half under.
Yeah, triggering after I had first half under I had both. I had full game under and I added first half under, and Colston Loveland. Oh, and wait, that's a totally other thing, which I forgot to mention. Bad job by me. Loveland got hurt in the Arkansas State game, and Sharon Moore said in his radio, whatever he does on Monday, not as bad as we thought, but like still evaluating. And he left, he got dinged up earlier in the game, and then they showed him going to the locker room. So, I mean, if Loveland doesn't play, he's their only plus pass catcher. So if he doesn't go, that's a whole nother thing. So bad job by me not bringing that up earlier. It's in my notes too. But again, first half under, I agree with. Full game under, I also agree with. But well noted that this game might be a little nip and tuck. But granted, maybe this Michigan team is just much worse than we could even find the bottom on.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised, too. I see the report now about the injury, the shoulder injury, being less serious than initially feared. How much of that is gamesmanship? He could be one of those situations where the media reports say that he's going to play all week, and then he doesn't see as many snaps as you might think. Maybe he doesn't get targeted as much.
And we know Michigan is pretty in the middle of that. They're not afraid to lie through their teeth to get somewhat of a competitive edge.
Right.
So let's move on to another team making a debut. Tennessee travels to Oklahoma. Oklahoma, I've really not been impressed with whatsoever. Really, really struggling, especially on the offensive line, I'd say is probably their biggest bugaboo I have for them. And Jackson Arnold hasn't really had time to showcase what I think is a pretty talented arm. They welcome Tennessee, who I know they played NC State, they smoked them. They played 2 tomato cans, they smoked them. I'd say relative to expectation, Tennessee has been arguably the most impressive team thus far. Nico looks well-equipped. I think this offense looks like it could be operating at its peak efficiency. I think this team is a bona fide college football playoff contender. We could see how high that really goes. But this market has really, really shifted out. We got Tennessee now laying 7 points in Norman for Oklahoma's SEC debut. Total has dipped down from the opener of 60.5 to 57.5. I bet under 59.5. That's my look in this game, and I can explain why I wouldn't necessarily bet 57.5, but I got to explain my thoughts on the under in a little bit. But Duck, what are your thoughts on this game and what you've seen from both teams to start the season?
Oklahoma really has not looked that great. I mean, they looked terrible against Houston. Couldn't move the ball. Couldn't avoid havoc. They couldn't find any explosiveness against a Houston team that was just destroyed by UNLV in the opener. And so really surprising that they couldn't really kind of do what they wanted to do. And other than a couple of late scores, the Tulane game was also neck and neck. And so it was just one of those things too, where the Oklahoma of old is really not been super impressive offensively. And so it's really kind of tough when your team is not running the ball very well and you're not putting up a bunch of points that we're used to Oklahoma doing. And I went back and looked at some tape on even when they played Temple. Temple had 8 or 9 havoc plays, 3 sacks. They had a dropped interception that could have been not a game changer for that game, but the interception turnover where they play that could have been something Temple would have achieved. 5 tackles for loss, and Oklahoma just does not really look as put together as you would potentially want to see. No. I mean, are we sure Jackson Arnold is really that good?
I am more concerned about the offensive line because there's some injuries there. I am going to give Arnold a bit of a mulligan. Maybe not this week, but just like in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, so then when we look at Tennessee, although the schedule has been weaker, 191-13, and they're scoring anytime they want, and their weapons on the outside are hard to cover, right? Mm-hmm. Thornton, Brazil, McCoy. There's so many guys that they have, and the quarterback play has been elite. I just, in my opinion, I think Oklahoma was probably correctly projected to be about a 7-5 or 8-4 SEC team this first year, and they might look like that team this week, right? I think
I think they could be worse. I was high on Oklahoma, not in like a win total market, but like going into the year, I thought this team would still be decent. They don't look decent, in my opinion.
No, and you can really tell the talent for Tennessee as well, right? Like oftentimes when there's a major mismatch in a game, like we kind of saw it with Penn State, right? When they played Bowling Green, they were 38-point favorites, and it's like, well, you're only up by 7 at half. What are you doing messing around with this team? Not the case with Tennessee. They 65-0 last week at half, and against UT Chattanooga, it was 41-0 after the first quarter, and it blew out NC State. This team is it's a train that I would not want to step in front of. Mm-hmm. So what I would try to find is I would find a 6.5 somewhere, pay -120, and I would lay it with Tennessee. And I would, again, it's a situation with this particular team where until I see something that it either looks off, or if they're playing against a foe that can stop them offensively, that's one thing. But I am not confident that Oklahoma is going to be able to match them score for score, despite being at home and having it be Oklahoma's first SEC contest, which they'll be jacked for. It's not enough to just win on emotion. I think that this is going to be a spot where Oklahoma, that 3-0 could be a little bit of fool's gold.
Yeah. So I'm not betting Tennessee in this game per se. I do think they're going to win pretty handily. We'll see where the market goes. But you just look at some of the numbers for Oklahoma in this game, and where I think there are some issues for Tennessee is in the back 7, in the secondary. They're a little unproven there. The pass rush, though, is among the best in the country, and they've proven that quickly. They rank 8th, and I know it's not adjusted for schedule, but they rank 8th in pass rush grade, and that includes a game against NC State. Oklahoma, they played Temple, they played Houston, who's a bad Big 12 team, and they played Tulane, who I would say is a very good AAC team. In that, they rank 128th in run blocking and 66th in pass blocking so far. So the offensive line is really, really struggling. So if you're going to have the likes of James Pierce breathing down Jackson Arnold's neck, I just struggle to see them really having time to get Deion Burks loose or get a healthy Nick Anderson loose in the passing game to really get this game going. Now, on the other side, I will say, this is Nico's first true road start. Maybe there is some struggles there. I think Tennessee wins this game pretty convincingly, but I do think that the Tennessee putting up like 50 points, we mentioned against NC State, maybe a little fraudulent. And again, this is not like an anti-Tennessee take. It's just, I think this total We also saw Oklahoma Tulane. That market went heavy on the under on game week. That total closed like 47 or something. I think it opened in the 50s. So I think you're going to see market movement on the under again here, even with Tennessee's frenetic offense. I just don't know if it's going to be this explosive game from Tennessee. I think they win pretty handedly, but I think this is more about their Tennessee winning with their defense more so than their offense. So I went under there. Not necessarily available. I'm not giving that as a play, but that's just like kind of my look in this game. I think Tennessee wins, but maybe it doesn't look as dominant as they have looked to date because it is their first true road test in the SEC. And I do think Oklahoma's defense is pretty legit, I still think.
And if I could just make one other point too for Oklahoma, what are they doing in third down so much against Houston, against Tulane?
They can't run the ball.
Right.
They're playing from behind the sticks constantly.
And that is a major concern, right? Even against Temple. I mean, Oklahoma against an atrocious Temple team that could not stop anybody last year, got blown out by Navy. Really, they were controlled at home against Coastal Carolina. Oklahoma was 1 for 12 on third down. And in their scoring drives, they had to convert on fourth down in order to cash those in for 7. So you're 1 for 12 on third down there. When you played Houston, you're 4 for 14. And then against Tulane, you're 8 for 16. But what are you doing in third down so much? And how is that going to go against the Tennessee front 7 when Oklahoma has already allowed 22 tackles for loss and 9 sacks, and teams are just getting pressure and creating havoc. And so that's one of those situations where they're going to be living in third down again. Tennessee is going to be able to likely get off the field, and it's hard to imagine a path to where Oklahoma is going to score more than about 20.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So Oklahoma, 4.86 yards per play, 116th in the country. And yeah. Maybe they haven't had as easy of a schedule as some of the other teams, but I mean, it's not like they're playing a murderer's row. So it's really been, they haven't had really, I know that 50-point game against Temple, that was not justified whatsoever. So I think that this is rough sledding. I like Tennessee in the game. I like the under a little bit more. Utah, Oklahoma State has been one of the swiftest early market movers. Oklahoma State opened as high. What do they open at? They open at 2. I saw 3s. It's now flipped. I imagine the opener was a little baked into the Cam Rising uncertainty. It does seem like Rising is going to go. Utah now a 2-point road favorite. Total of 50. Let's call it 52. Duck, what are your thoughts on this one? Utah's opener. Oklahoma State, I thought got off to a slow start, but has round into form nicely. They took care of business against Tulsa. How do you see Utah's first game in the Big 12 going?
It's going to be real interesting. I don't have a play on this game particularly, and I would have and probably should have taken a position on the under and still might, but I don't know. Oklahoma State usually has a game every year where they lose and then have to circle the wagons, and Gundy kind of is able to do that. This year that game was Arkansas, and they actually escaped with a double overtime win that they shouldn't have.
They shouldn't have covered 8 either.
Shouldn't have covered. No, they covered, which is unbelievable. Oh, and push on 8, but a lot of teams followed the steam and took Arkansas plus 7.5 or plus 7. What a brutal loss that was. But they completely overmatched Tulsa last week in a game that was just never close. Tulsa had no resistance to Oklahoma State. I actually like what Oklahoma State has done this year offensively. I think that their output has been really okay. You know, the running back Ollie Gordon is an absolute stud, although he hasn't really gotten going this year, and he's not going to get going against Utah, so they're going to have to rely on Bowman to really make plays in key situations, because I don't think that they're going to be able to run the football on Utah's front 7, and it'll be real interesting for Utah. I'm not sold on Cam. I mean, is Cam right? The question is he healthy? And is he going to play? And is he going to perform well? Because I haven't been super impressed with Utah. I look back to their game against Baylor when Baylor spotted them 23-0 early. Yeah. But the scoring drives for Utah were the result of turnovers, and they were short, right? So Utah scored on a 56-yard touchdown drive and then a 1-play 3-yard touchdown drive. And then
I think they blocked a punt or something too.
Field goal return touchdown. So after the first quarter, Utah's offense didn't score again. And then last week against Utah State, it ended up being a 17-point game, but it was not a 17-point
No,
game.
that was competitive.
It was really competitive against a terrible Utah State team. And when first 4 possessions, punt, field goal, punt, and then they were stopped on downs or late in the first half. And it was just one of those games where Utah should be blowing that team out, and they just weren't. And so it's another situation for Utah where they are really bad on third down, and they spend a lot of time in third down. They did it against Southern Utah. They did it against Utah State. I'm going to look back at the Baylor stats here quick too. 3 for 13 against Utah State. Against Baylor, they were 4 for 14. What are they doing in third down so much, and why are they unable to convert? And that's really concerning for me going on the road at Oklahoma State, who doesn't have an exquisite elite defense, but their defense is solid enough to be able to kind of shut that down. If you constantly find yourself in 3rd and 8 or longer, it's going to be tough for them to it's just not sustainable, right, to continue to have to rely on doing that, especially on the road. So yeah, I'm not sold on Utah going in there and getting the win. And so I would recommend at this point, I think an under could be in play, because Oklahoma State, they want to run the football, and they might stubbornly just do that and lean on the best player on their team, Ollie Gordon, to try to make things happen. Although he's been bottled up this year, I can see this. Go ahead.
No, I want to see this gets to 3 and then play Oklahoma State, because I do think Utah really thrives at Rice Eccles. You mentioned Cam Rising. It was like a lacerated hand, and like he apparently could have played last week, and they held him out for this game. I just wonder, and I wonder if Oklahoma State, you mentioned the run game is what they want to do. Alan Bowman's been, I know he makes some questionable decisions, but he's been kind of slinging it around, and we saw it against Tulsa. Granted, Tulsa, Utah is, a big jump in class, but Oklahoma State hasn't allowed a sack yet. The offensive line does look this is a veteran offensive line. I just wonder if we're giving Utah a little too much credit for what they've been in the past and not what this team might be, because we saw them beat a shitty Southern Utah team. We saw them beat up on Baylor. Like you mentioned, they got ahead early, and I think they would have anyway, but still they got ahead early. And then Utah State, I don't know, defense, kind of a bad look to be allowing more than 6 yards per play to Utah State. I know it's on the road. I get that, but you should be kind of destroying that team. So I don't know. What if Rising isn't 100%? Then, this game swings pretty quickly towards Oklahoma State. So I do wonder if Oklahoma State's like wise to this opportunity. So I'm going to be waiting on this one. I'm interested. You think under might be your preferred method on the total?
Yeah, I would play the under, only because Utah, they do struggle away from home. In fact, 2-5 ATS, their last 7 away from Rice Eccles, and so they're a team where their defense can certainly travel, but offensively their output is not the same away from home. And so it's one of those situations as well where they do have a good defense, and they have a defense that they can certainly lean on. I would suspect that, especially early on in this game, it'll be similar, could be similar in nature to what we saw in Georgia Clemson, where you have 2 teams that are fairly evenly matched. They're kind of feeling each other out. There's not a lot of scoring. If you want to play over in this game, I'd wait for punt, and then you can pop a 44.5 over live if you want to go that way, and you can put yourself in a much better position with a better number and get under some key numbers. Right now, as we sit here, I would play under 52.5, which is also a key number. I'd get under 52.5 or 53.5. But that's the way I would play the total at this point.
Super interesting game, though. That is like a big data point, I think, for both teams, because you're really going to see Cam Rising against some good competition. Oklahoma State, let me just, before we move on to the next game, Oklahoma State, the pass rush has been fine. They haven't necessarily played like a murderer's row. So I'm curious how they will do against a pretty physical Utah front, but we'll see. Another Big 12 game I want to ask you about, Duck. Arizona State, Texas Tech. Arizona State goes to San Marcos, beats my Bobcats, much to my dismay.
Mhm.
Texas Tech, meanwhile, they get off the schneid and they beat the crap out of North Texas. I think the game, if you look a little bit closer, was a little bit more lopsided due to some turnover variance, but ultimately they beat up on a crappy team. There was market sentiment against Texas Tech last week and Arizona State. Now it looks like the market's back in on Texas Tech. What are your thoughts here, if you have any, on Arizona State, Texas Tech? And then we could kind of fire through a handful of games and get some of your early bets in the week.
Yeah, well, I did have a good week 3. One of my week 3 losers was I did have the Texas State on the money line. I had a plus 108, and they are probably filled with regret after the way that fourth quarter played out and the way the whole second half played out, where you really got the sense that Texas State was really playing that game not to lose, right? The pressure was mounting. They had the game firmly in hand, up 21-7. They were forcing a punt. I think they either had an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty or some other penalty, which allowed Arizona State to extend the drive. Instead of having the football up 2 scores, they allow a score and then allow another one, and bam, they're in a tie game at half. And they just could never regain firm control and ended up turning the ball over 2 or 3 times in the fourth quarter. And that was ultimately what did it for them. They couldn't make plays. And credit Arizona State, right? Arizona State was a team that people have been down on all summer as a team that was going to be terrible in the Big 12. Regular season win total opened at 5, bet to 4.5 quickly. I think there was even some 4s that people were going under on. That's a losing ticket. They're going to win more than 4 games. And I'm not in love with, excuse me, I'm not in love with their style necessarily. Although they came out firing against Wyoming in a game that, man, looking back, that was such a slam dunk with them.
Yeah, that was a blow. That was an absolute shit show. They just absolutely pumped them. And
then did the same to Mississippi State in the first half, and then kind of fell asleep in the fourth quarter, let Mississippi State kind of get back in it. But I don't know, man. I am not really sold on what Texas Tech is. I saw them a lot, actually, because they played a thriller to open the season against Abilene Christian, which they should not be losing an overtime game to Abilene Christian, where they could have lost the game on. Excuse me, it was overtime. Yeah, Abilene Christian scores and goes for 2 and doesn't get it, but should not be surrendering 400 yards or 500 yards to 600 yards to Abilene Christian. And then they were blown out by Wazoo, predictably. But even the North Texas game, I mean, they gave up so many yards to North Texas, and North Texas kind of year in and year out, they have a terrible, terrible, terrible defense. And if North Texas turns the ball over, they're going to get blown out. And that's exactly what happened, was turnover variance. And I did not expect North Texas to get any stops, and neither did the market. Market closed at total was 70. It's one of the first times all season I've seen a total at 70. Those used to be commonplace in college football, but not anymore with the way that the game is changing. But they really racked it up against a really terrible defense. I don't think Arizona State has a terrible defense. I think Arizona State is a team that's going to go into this game believing that they can compete. It's an important game for both teams. I'm real interested to see the weather, because in West Texas at this time of the year, the wind can really wreak havoc, and 20 to 25 mile an hour wind is not uncommon down there in West Texas in Lubbock. And that could be a situation where it really poses some problems for the Texas Tech passing game. And that could be something that Arizona State can really work to their advantage.
So Arizona State getting a little bit healthier on the defensive line. I'm trying to pull up the tweet that had the injury notification on it, but Arizona State should be healthier than it has been, definitely given last week. But I think Arizona State's just better than Texas Tech. You mentioned their struggles against Abilene Christian. How about just over the balance of this year now? Texas Tech is 117th in yards per play, 104th in EPA per play, outside the top 120 in both explosive rush and pass rate. And you think about the style Arizona State wants to play. Sure, Sam Levitt looked good as a passer, but he's a capable runner, and they want to lean on Cam Scatterbo quite a bit. We watched Texas Tech go to Pullman and let John Mateer basically run quarterback power down their throats. And I know they lost the turnover battle, and they actually outgained Wazoo, but you let the quarterback of the other team run for over 200 yards and only complete 9 passes. So I actually think Arizona State will be the most complete offense that they have seen to date. So I think that the market's moving a little bit too much in their favor. Texas Tech also has a boatload of injuries. Taj Brook came back from injury, but they're down depth at running back. They're down several players on the defensive side of the ball for the entire season. Arizona State, I just mentioned, I still can't find it because I'm talking as I say it, but they are getting healthier on the defensive line. And when I pass it back to you, I'll have the injury info. And they also get some extra rest here after playing on Thursday night. So they do get it's not a mini bye, they do have a bit of a rest advantage here. So I think I see 3.5 at FanDuel right now. It's a little juiced. I'm willing to take that with the hook because I do think that this game can be tight throughout. And I think Arizona State to me has proven they're a better football team. So I'm willing to take this. I make this game Texas Tech -1. So I'm in on the Sun Devils here. I think that they could definitely keep this game competitive. I don't think you're really getting an upgrade here. Now, look, they closed it, a 2.5, 3-point dog at Texas State last week. So I think you need to bump them. I know it was a close win, but I think you still need to give them an upgrade there.
Yeah, Texas State is no slouch, right? I think Texas State is a team that was, if they win that game, they're the front runner for G5 to make the playoff, and certainly could be a team that rips through a really solid Sun Belt league. And so that is really that has to be a bump because that's a win on the road against a really good team. And so now they're back on the road here. Texas Tech, like you said, they haven't been as explosive. They haven't had a lot of success. They live in third down again, and Arizona State's been locked down on third down defense. Teams have only converted 14 out of 43 on third down against Arizona State. And what does that result in? It results in long field goals. It results in punts. It results in fourth down stops. And all those things are good for Arizona State, who I think Scadaboo could have a monster day against Swiss cheese.
Prop ladders.
Absolutely. Over. Ladder them all because Scadaboo is a dude and still a guy that a lot of people don't know about coming in from Sac State, but he is a very, very good running back and a guy that I think is going to, he's one of those guys that just at times has put the team on his back and does whatever it takes. He's played quarterback. He's thrown the ball. He has run 20 or 30 carries. And I think that's what I would do if I was Arizona State, is lean on him and run the ball. And 3.5 would certainly be a play.
Yeah. So major reinforcements here on the Arizona State defensive side. They get back one of their starters, Prince Dorba, depth linebacker, Jordan Kruk. They also get back Jacob Kanagia. I definitely said that one wrong, but also a defensive lineman and some depth offensive line as well in Sean Naya. He is a backup, more just depth more than anything. But I think the real key is on the defensive line. And I don't know what we could expect from Brennan Morton here as the quarterback. This is a Taj Brook-led offense. And what Arizona State does best is shut down the defensive line. They do really, really good work there. So I like Arizona State with the 3.5. So, Duck, let's keep moving here because I know there's a lot of games we want to get to. So let's try and go maybe more rapid fire, and we'll see if we can find some more plays here. So let's talk ECU-Liberty. ECU, Jake Garcia is, I don't even know what to say here. This guy is a roller coaster of emotions. As someone who had ECU and had their win total over, I was really pulling for them against App State, and that game had one of the craziest finishes of the entire day. They now go to Liberty, though, who I have been unimpressed with to start this season. They nearly lose to New Mexico State, who I think is absolutely terrible, among the 5 worst teams in all the FBS this year, in my opinion. Liberty, they take care of business against UTEP last week, but this has not been the raring start that we thought for a team that was hoping to be the G5 auto bid. What do you see here with ECU catching over a touchdown right now against Liberty?
Well, it's a play I've made. I have ECU in pocket plus 7.5 for a really sizable wager. It's one of my favorite plays of the weekend. I also have ECU money line in the round robin parlay as well. I've already hit one of those this year. I hit 5 out of 6.
You did. So my best has been 3 for 6. So I got some work to do to catch up to you, but that's good. Good to hear.
Going back to Liberty, they have some real problems. They've got problems on defense. They were in a battle with Campbell to start the year, a game that was a 10-point game going into the fourth quarter, and they closed that game minus 41.5. Never came close to covering that monster number, hosting Campbell to open the season. And then let's go back to that New Mexico State game for a quick minute, because New Mexico State had a magical run. Their last 2 seasons have been pretty good, but not nearly the same New Mexico State team. And so it's not apples to apples from this year to last year for New Mexico State. This is a really, really down team that is really bad on defense, really bad on special teams. Their offense really, really struggles. And Liberty could not move the football. They could not convert on third down. They could not complete passes. They were really in a bad way. And it took a 21-point fourth quarter, a real miracle that they even won the game, right? They were down by 9 points with 5 minutes to go. It took 2 touchdowns in the last 5 minutes for them to escape Las Cruces with a win. And I look back at their tape from last week when they hosted UTEP, and that was no blowout win. That was a 4-point game with 2 minutes to go in the third quarter. Against UTEP, who is also experiencing transition and has no intestinal fortitude in the trenches and can't do anything on offense.
They did that one drive against Nebraska, though, where they ruined our over.
Yes. But I mean, they only outgained UTEP by 78 yards, and it's just something's missing from this Liberty team. They're not nearly as explosive as they were last year. They don't have the offensive punch. And frankly, in my opinion, had Liberty lost at New Mexico State, which they very easily could have and should have, and on the other side, to play devil's advocate with ECU, ECU's been very, very impressive this year. They have major dudes on defense. Jake Garcia, a little too flippant with the football, honestly. He's made way too many mistakes. He's obviously thrown, 8 picks already this year. He's just way too flippant with the ball. But had they closed out that game against App State and ECU is sitting at 3-0, I know it's woulda, coulda, shoulda, but what's this line, a pick 'em?
That's what I'm saying.
Where I
don't know if it would be a pick 'em, but Liberty small favorite. Let's call it
-2.
I was gonna say 3, but
Okay.
yeah, like competitive game. Obviously, this is being priced like these guys are in 2 different classes,
and it's just not right. And honestly, ECU again probably very much filled with regret. They get up 16-0 in the first quarter, and they just could not sustain drives in the second half, which is of concern. But I don't know, man. I think that ECU is a team that this is a really important win to kind of set the tone on the rest of their season. I think ECU is going to be really, really competitive and in the mix in the American. And I don't think that there's this much separation between the teams, even being on the road. I think East Carolina, their defensive, really the back 7 too, their corners have played well. Their linebacking group has stepped in and filled holes in the run game, and they can cover in pass coverage. So I think it's going to be one of those things where unless we see some more fluky play, or if the turnover bad luck continues for ECU, outside of those 2 circumstances, I think ECU is very live.
So I agree. ECU is a team I was high on going into the season, and we talked about the play call change. They're going to this up-tempo style under Ole Miss co-offensive coordinator John David Baker. The defense last season was elite. It was the offense that couldn't hold up, and the defense has held up its end of the bargain. They just shut down App State's offense at 21 points. They rank first in tackles for loss so far this season, second in defensive line yards, and 21st in yards per play, allowing about 4 yards per play. So I'm confident in this defense. It's if Jake Garcia could be just a little bit more protective of the rock. 5 big-time throws to 9 turnover-worthy plays so far this season. But this ECU offense, though, can really, really hum. This offense is not some gimmick. It's not fluky. The team has moved the ball relatively easily throughout the season. It's just the turnovers are really stopping a lot of their momentum. So a little bit cleaner with the ball. It's not like he's facing a murderer's row of Liberty defenders who they weren't that great last year, to be honest. And it's not even like they're really wowing this year. They face an easy schedule. They rank 32nd in EPA per play. This is the best offense they have seen so far this season. So I think at over a touchdown, ECU is a no-doubt bet. I think there's enough variance with Garcia, both up and down, that ECU is live to win this game. I think ECU, especially with their defense, can keep them in this game. And I think this should be competitive throughout. And I agree with you that again, turnovers will be key, but I think ECU could definitely keep this one close for sure. I have not been impressed with Liberty whatsoever.
And looking forward too, because again, I'm still high on ECU, and a couple of their games this year. They obviously play on the coast in North Carolina, not far from where I live. And the last couple of weeks on Saturdays have happened to have just really bad weather too. A lot of wind, a lot of rain. So they've played in some bad weather games, which could be not that causation is correlation, but it is a factor to maybe some of the poor play with the quarterback position. Has been some rough weather. But look at the schedule too. Like if you really believe in ECU, you can still grab a plus 2,000 to win the league. And you look at the remaining schedule after this for conference play. They host UTSA, who quite frankly is terrible.
Yeah, it's a bad it's not your whatever was
not the triangle of toughness. No, not the triangle of toughness that they hang their hat on there, Jeff Traylor. Charlotte, Army, Temple, FAU, Tulsa, North Texas, and Navy. There's a very real chance that ECU can win every one of those games and be in the conference championship, at which point you could decide to hedge out of the bet or let it ride. But ECU is kind of the hidden gem, in my opinion, for long shots to win the league, because they don't play Tulane, they don't play Memphis, and they could be there at 8-0 while those other teams won't be 8-0. So they may just get in because they have a better record.
Yeah. I also, again, we're talking 20-1 here briefly. Garcia's turnovers are obviously a major issue, but I do think that type of variance puts you, like when you want some boom or bust when you're talking 20-1, right? You want some, like, this is still a former Power 5 quarterback who didn't play for basically 2 full seasons. Like, he could be, and this is maybe me like projecting and coping, but he could be still getting his legs under him, figuring it out again. And like, again, if this clicks, all of a sudden he's among the better quarterbacks in this conference. Like, the turnovers, like, you got to sign up for that kind of.
Well, and the thing to think about too is these teams with film study and practice and repetition, teams improve throughout the season, and they can really improve during a bye week. So what'll be real interesting to see is how they play at Charlotte, and then how do they look at Army after the bye week, and really where the growth might be. So there's still going to be a lot to watch for ECU, but he can certainly improve his play. We're 3 weeks into the season. The book's not out on him or this team yet, and frankly, I've still been impressed with what I've seen on ECU. They're 3-0 against the number. Despite the loss, they closed plus 2.5. Hosting App State, so still 3-0 against the number, beating expectations, and every one of their goals is still right in front of them.
I'm drawing a blank on his name, but the running back is also a devastating
major.
Yeah, he's a dude.
He is a dude.
Let's stay in the G5 here and stay in the American for some of it. Louisiana takes on Tulane, what I think is a pretty interesting spot. I know everyone likes in sports betting to talk about like spots and this spot and that spot, but it's an in-state rivalry, I guess, if you want to call it a rivalry, but in-state foes going at it. Tulane coming off back-to-back Power 4 opponents. They cover in both of them, depending on what number you got on the Tulane-Oklahoma game, but 2 big games. They play South Florida next week to start AAC play, if I'm not mistaken. And they now go to Louisiana, a team that hasn't been challenged yet, but is on, in my opinion, is a top 4, top 3rd team in the Sun Belt. Team that's probably on the rise. UL is a home dog here, catching, let's call it a flat 3, the total of 54.5. What do you think here, Doc?
Well, I love spots. In fact, one of the first things I do when my Phil Steele publication comes to my house is I go through every team's schedule line by line, and I look for look-ahead spots. I look for tough road trips, back-to-back roadies. Some teams play 3 in a row on the road, and I'm always looking for spots where there might be a team that is either going to be able to try to exhale and they're not going to cover a big spread, or a team that's really going to put the hammer down, or a quasi rivalry game. And I had this spot circled for Louisiana Lafayette in red ink, and I think this is one of those games that's going to be I just think it's going to be tough for Tulane. You've got 2 back-to-back Power 5 max efforts, 2 games that they have to feel they kind of let slip away. Now, the Oklahoma margin ended up being 15, but there was a point in that game where they had the ball with a chance to really, really make things interesting, and they just couldn't get it done. And they completely gave away the Kansas State game. That was a game that they had firmly in hand and just could not make the plays needed to win it, and at the end didn't even really have a chance to tie it against Kansas State. So deflating loss there. But what I'm talking about in the Oklahoma game was when they had the ball in the fourth quarter, down by 5, and they go for it on 4th and 1 on their own territory and throw a pick. Oklahoma scores 4 plays later, and that kind of extended the margin. But I mean, make no mistake about it, they lost by 15. They had the ball in the fourth quarter with a chance to take the lead. So it's one of those, again, where it's a max effort. They're playing up in competition, pretty physical game. How much of that does that carry over to this week against ULL? Frankly, ULL has not played anybody. They've played terrible Grambling State and really bad Kennesaw State, beaten both handily. And now they've been off, right? And they've been game planning for Tulane. And Tulane's been road warriors for the last couple of weeks while Louisiana Lafayette's fresh. And ULL is really a different team at home. And the atmosphere they rally around, and the crowd is going to be huge. And I think that there's going to be a lot of the kind of pomp and circumstance surrounding these games that this particular situation, Louisiana Lafayette will have a lot of that in their favor. And just, again, one of those spot plays where maybe Tulane is the better team from a scheme standpoint and personnel standpoint, but it's one of those games where I have ULL in the round robin moneyline parlay, and I think that it's a noon slate at home. They're going to be really fired up. I took the Raging Cajuns.
I took the Raging Cajun as well. Something else I noted, and you did a great job breaking this game down, so I won't repeat too much. So Troy's old head coach, John Summerall, is now the head coach at Tulane. So Summerall's pretty equipped on what this ULL team is. I'll give him credit for that. Last season, these two teams played, and Louisiana was ravaged by injuries last year. One of the most injury-riddled teams. The team went to Troy, and this is when Troy was at its best, and Louisiana was battling for bowl eligibility. Lost 31-24. And if you go deeper into the box scores, a dead even game. Troy outgained them by 19 yards, same yards per play total. Louisiana was able to throw the ball all over the field on them. They had 282 passing yards. It was a pretty dead even game. Lose by 7. So I just think that this Louisiana team is going to be familiar, and there are a lot of similarities with Summerall's coaching staff coming over from Troy, some Troy transfers as well. So I do think that there's some familiarity here that gives me even more credence to the coaching staff being able to coach this one up on both sides. But then when I look at the spot and I see what Tulane's done the last 2 weeks, look what's ahead of them. This is one where, and look, I mentioned in the AAC preview, I like Tulane to win the AAC because I think they're good, but I don't like their win total because their non-conference is among the hardest in the country. So this is where this is going to factor in because I could definitely see them losing this game. I'm happy to grab the 3. I think, like you mentioned, in terms of the rest and fatigue, this is just a brutal situation for Tulane. Louisiana, this is from my prep notes, how injured they were. They returned 4 starters on the offensive line, despite being injured, despite cycling through 3 different quarterbacks, 15th in line yards, 21st in EPA per play on the offensive side of the ball. Now they're fully healthy. They returned 4 starters on that side of the ball. Defense, top 15 returning production, which I think actually matters for the group of 5 teams. I know that is kind of like,
it does matter.
I think it's losing its luster in terms of talking like big, like the power 4 teams because of transfer portal. To me, top 50 returning production is pretty important, and they didn't allow explosive plays whatsoever. And if you look at what Darian Mentz has put on tape so far this season, that guy's hunting big plays left and right. He's super, super aggressive at pushing the ball down the field. This team ranked 44th in explosive pass defense and 10th in explosive rush defense. Also top 15 turnovers gained. And Mentz has been willing to put the ball in harm's way. So I'm in full agreement with Duck. I played ULL at 3.5. I think 3 is still fine, though, for the sake of the show. And yeah, so I got a few more games. Then I want to talk to you about weeknight games, Duck, before we get out of here.
Yep.
Really quick, BYU, Kansas State. Any thoughts? Because I have a thought.
Oh man, I mean, it's been one of those things where if you go in and lay points on the road in Provo, you are just doomed for pain and frustration. I don't have a real strong opinion either way on this, but I don't. it's hard to see Kansas State necessarily losing this game. I don't know that BYU is really any good. And I think the dual threat capabilities of Avery Johnson are going to be able to get the BYU defense broken down. We saw it with Southern Illinois, where Southern Illinois has a mobile quarterback and they were able to gain yards aplenty against the BYU defense. The game ended up kind of getting out of hand for the Salukis, but they were able to move the football. So I think Kansas State will certainly be able to do that. But it's one of those things where BYU is just such a different team at home. So it'll be hard to lay any more than 7, in my opinion.
So for those that listen to the show know I've been fading BYU because I particularly like this team as a home underdog, catching a lot of points. I want them in this specific situation, and now I'm going to go to them, and hopefully they don't take me the wrong way here. You look at what Jake Retzlaff's doing, and what I noticed in the Kansas State-Tulane game is this Kansas State secondary is in bad shape. We saw Mensa. We were just talking about him with Tulane. Darian Mensa took the top off the defense, averaged over 10 yards per drop back in the 90th percentile. Arizona last week on the road, the game got away from that first drive. I mean, Arizona was able to move the ball. It was, as the game wore on, they ran out of steam, and they were efficient early on, and then the game kind of just got away from it and snowballed. Now on the road, tough environment, tough place to play. Provo, night game, undefeated BYU. I like this setup now for Jake Retzlaff, who has a lively arm. He has 11 big-time throws already this season. Granted, a lot of them came against Wyoming, but he's been able to really, really push the ball down the field. If you go through his PFF splits, this is impressive. 45% of his passes have been more than 10 yards down the field, and he's completing more than half of them. He's completed 25 of 44% on passes more than 10 yards down the field. I don't know if this Kansas State defense is going to be able to take advantage. Teams should be healthier at running back. That was a concern for me last week. I don't know, man. I don't know if I could trust this Kansas State team as much as I have in the past. It's also worth noting SMU is much worse than I think we could have expected, but BYU has some havoc drivers on the defensive line, some big boys that are pushing it around. And I question this Kansas State offensive line still just a bit. I know they have elite rushers, but they're still replacing Cooper Beebe, an NFL lineman, and they're still turning some over there. So I do wonder how much this is going to work, where they're going to be able to push as forward as they were against what I think is a poor Arizona rush defense. Now going on the road, I don't know if that's going to travel as well. So I took the 7.5 with BYU. Let's see if that's still available. I hope it is.
7 now is where it's at.
I'll take the 7 for the sake of the show, just to get some plays out there, because I do like it. I make this one closer to 6.
And yeah, there is actually, I would say, just my opinion for you documenting on your show, I see 3 reputable books with 7.5. So 7.5 is widely available.
There we go. 7.5. So
I'm going to hit the submit button as soon as we hang up the phone here.
I think this is the situation where you like BYU. And listen, maybe I just have a blind spot this team and I can't get a read on them, but I think the way Retzlaff plays goes into how I think you can beat Kansas State. I don't think you can run on them. I think you can throw on them.
Yeah, and Chase Roberts has to have a monster day, right? And I think that they couldn't hold down Arizona's stud receiver T-Mac for too terribly long, and he ended up with 11 for 138. And so BYU is certainly, BYU is another one of those teams where you're not always recruiting now in college football based on like culture and the way that we do things. Clemson does that. BYU does that, right? BYU, obviously, with the religious ties to the Mormon church and things of that nature, they recruit a lot of those guys. And Kalani Sitake, I mean, give him credit or not credit for how he manages in-game situations, but the guy can recruit players that fit their system, and you kind of really know what you're going to get from a consistency standpoint with BYU, and that only gets magnified at home. So certainly at home is where you want to back them.
So there's 4 games during the weeknights, we'll call it. Got one Thursday, South Alabama, App State, and then you have 3 Friday with Wazoo, San Jose State, Illinois, Nebraska, Stanford, Syracuse. Any of those games stick out to you? And then we'll kind of go rapid fire, recap our best bets. You could share whatever we kind of left off. But anything on the weeknight slate stick out to you as a potential play?
Washington State minus 13.5 at home. It's a tough spot coming off the big
Interesting.
emotional.
I'm surprised you went there.
So I've been involved in the San Jose State games every week this season. I had San Jose in week 1 as a small favorite, laid the points there. I had San Jose State as an underdog at Air Force for a variety of reasons. I've been pretty dialed in with Air Force this year and what they can and cannot do. And my play there was that obviously Navy Ken is now coaching San Jose State. And if anyone knows how to stop the option, it's him. And they did exactly that. But San Jose State has played Sac State, an Air Force team that is one of the worst offenses of the country and cannot move the football. And then Kennesaw State, who's just simply not ready to compete at the FBS level week in and week out. And I went back to the tape where Sacramento State went up and down the field against the San Jose State defense, and they could not stop it. And Sac State has a mobile quarterback. They've got some skill guys that they throw it around on. And San Jose State, they turned the second half around because of turnovers, but San Jose State was down multiple scores in that game, and Sac State was getting whatever they wanted on offense, and San Jose could not stop it. And so it's real interesting to me to try to think about San Jose State being able to stop Washington State's offense in any real capacity. I just don't see it happening. I look at Wazoo. They've been lights out at home. They're off a big physical game in the Apple Cup game for sure against Washington, but this team is very well coached. Their offense is immensely 107 points in 2 home games. And I think the San Jose State line is reflective of a team that's 3-0 playing against another 3-0 team. I don't see San Jose State having a lot of success on defense, stopping Washington State and their mobile quarterback, Mateer, who's a dude. Yeah. And they're just versatile on offense, and they're going to be able to score a lot of points against San Jose State. I would definitely lean over in this game. I think it's 55.5. But Washington State, to me, is, if you look up in the third quarter and this is 31-10 or 38-10 and San Jose State's drawing dead, how are they going to get within the number? It's too short for me to back the Spartans. I still think San Jose State is a bad football team, despite the fact that they've started 3-0 against weak competition. And this could be one of those games where you look back later on and be like, man, that was such a cheap line. Why didn't I back the Cougs? Who, I don't have the Cougs as an underdog in any other games this year. They could be 12-0.
They have a pretty easy schedule. I remember noting that during the preseason. I was thinking maybe over. Well, at 14 or more, I'd be interested in San Jose State, but maybe over is the look, given that San Jose State probably can't get stopped. I do think the offense has been much friskier, I think, than people had imagined first year in this new, the spread and shred offense. Emmett Brown, he returns to Pullman, transferring from Wazoo. So maybe a little extra momentum there, or motivation there. We'll see. What about Illinois traveling to Nebraska? I know we talked about Nebraska earlier. Illinois has been a team I have bet on earlier this season. I thought this team was probably better than the market, and that happened when we got a pretty good outcome against Kansas. But low total. Went back and looked last year. Nebraska won at Illinois 20-7, but it was pretty competitive. Pretty ugly game. Both offenses stunk at the time. Both offenses, in my opinion, are much better. Do you have any opinion there, or even on Syracuse-Stanford? I haven't played anything on the weeknight games.
Last year, Illinois was off double revenge after a couple of Nebraska was off double revenge after a couple of games losing to Illinois, where they kind of blew those games and should have won. And so Nebraska was kind of exercising some demons there. I really
that hit 10. I'm in on Illinois. It's just such a low total.
Well, again, so I've been on Nebraska 3 weeks in a row, and I've been involved in Nebraska game 3 weeks in a row. They did not hit the over in UTEP, unbelievably, and then they did cover against Prime Time, and they covered last week because of my guy of the week. Mm-hmm. But I am just very concerned about the pattern of the play calling, the change in game momentum, the change in tempo, the change in style of play in the second half, where it's almost like Matt Rule is still in this like managing games like he's in the NFL, right? Where you get a lead by a couple scores and you just bleed the clock. And that's just not how the college leagues are played. And I feel like it's going to be really hard for Nebraska to extend the margin. I also feel like this is the best defense that Nebraska's played all year. And it's just one of those games where, Illinois is going to bring it. So I think if we see a 10 pop, or if Nebraska goes up early in the first quarter and you see a live 13.5 or 12.5, that's when you jump in on the Illini.
I was higher on Illinois going into the season, and I think everybody was high on Nebraska going into the season. I think this Illinois defense, though, continues to impress me. It's not necessarily that they're getting so many tackles for loss, but they bend, don't break very often. They're top 40 in EPA per pass. Nebraska hasn't been super explosive with the passing game. They've been a lot of dink and dunk and stuff. And you mentioned their play calling. I don't really like their offensive coordinator, Satterfield. So I think that I trust Illinois' coaching staff a little bit more here to at least keep this game competitive. I'm not going to call for the outright upset on the road because it should be a pretty rocking environment. Nebraska is always a tough place to play, but this hits 10 with a total of 43. Illinois has made, they have some pretty legitimate, getting Zachary Franklin, I think, has gone completely under the radar from, he came from UTSA and then he didn't really catch on at Ole Miss. He's now at Illinois and he's been making some plays. Pat Bryant's pretty good. I still like their running back, Caden Fagan. Luke Altmaier, that's a former SEC guy. I think he's decent. So this Illinois team isn't devoid of talent. So I think this is a pretty big upgrade for Nebraska. Because just think, this was 2 weeks ago. This team was a home favorite of a touchdown against Colorado. Where does Illinois fit into that equation? You know what I mean? How much are you really upgrading Nebraska? I know they beat the crap out of Colorado, but is Illinois getting no credit here?
Well, in Colorado, I mean, it's similar in nature, maybe less drastic, but Colorado has some very evident holes that Sanders can mask for a while, right? Winning masks and good quarterback play. Like Peyton Manning in the NFL was so good at masking the problems, but the problems are still there for Colorado. And after what happened to Nebraska last year against Colorado, there was no doubt that was one of those games that they absolutely had to throttle them. But again, didn't score in the second half. And one other thing of concern that I just wanted to note, when you're watching these games, there is some garbage time, but there is some meaningful snaps and some takeaways that you can have. Northern Iowa moved the football all night against Nebraska. They had 1 3-and-out. Every other possession resulted in at least 1 first down and multiple, right? 16 play drive, 7 play drive, 9, 6, 9, 12 plays. While Northern Iowa only scored 3 points, they moved the ball and achieved first downs, and they kind of got what they wanted on offense against Nebraska until you get in 3rd and long after a sack or whatever, and that's kind of you're up against it. But it was not like a smothering showing by the Blackshirts defense. And so I think Illinois is going to have some success offensively in this game. And they've got to get Zachary Franklin the ball. He is such an offensive explosive weapon. And if they can get him the ball and maybe run the football a little bit and play some field position, 10 is the only way I would want a 10, but Illinois for sure.
Let's get 10 there. All right, Duck, you've been gracious with your time. Why don't you, any other bets that stand out to you to recap what we shared on this show, any other plays, and if you want to give a word on anything else that stands out to you on the slate, please, this is your time, and I plug all the work you're doing this season.
Yeah, so I'm writing for the Action Network, so a lot of my write-ups and my plays can be seen there at Action Network. Really active on the forums too, so covers Capping the Game, the RX forum, and so with my threads, you'll see reasoning write-ups. You'll see what I'm looking at with these plays, and 58% winners. And so that's kind of what we strive to do. You'll see a lot of FCS action. A lot of people are still referring to the FCS as Division II, which is wrong and it's terrible. But there is money to be made in the FCS, and a lot of those lines are off early. So we discuss a lot of that. This week, Boston College. So I've had this game circled for months. They have a situation at Boston College that they do annually. It's called their Red Bandana Game. It's for one of their former students who played lacrosse, Wells Crowther, who died in 9/11 going back into the Twin Towers to save people and get them out of the building before the buildings collapsed. And he lost his life doing that. This is a monumental game for Boston College. Every year they do their red bandana game, and this week it's against Michigan State. This game is going to be immensely important for the alumni, for the players, for the staff. Every year you get an absolute max effort from Boston College in this situation. You can go back year after year after year. It's been Virginia Tech they've beaten, Miami they've beaten. Last year they were plus 29 against Florida State and lost by 2.
Yep.
Boston College minus 6.5 was the first play I made as soon as the lines came out. I don't care what the market is doing on this game. I'm playing Boston College, and Boston College is a better team, and they're at home, and it's a night game. This is going to be one of those situations where you play the Eagles no matter what.
There's some juice 6.5s out there. There's a 7 worth noting also just from my notes. Michigan State a bit banged up. I'll be brief on this, but John, this is just reading from the Rivals boards, shout out Spartans Illustrated, and the author, his name is Jacob Kostanica. Quote him. He says, on the injury front, Smith says that offensive lineman Gavin Brochicius is probably out for the year after suffering a lower body injury. This is a second blow at right guard for Spartans, with former starter Kristen Phillips already out. They also got banged up at wide receiver as well. Yeah, so they are really banged up already. There have been mounting injuries there, so just something to know. Anything else that sticks out to you?
Yes. One of my dudes that I've been circling all year, and I've been on them every week, New Mexico. They have an absolute stud quarterback, Dampier. They've got stud receivers that nobody talks about, Wysong. They've got some good tight ends. They're moving the football up and down the field against competition that they've really been overmatched on, and they're covering big spreads. This week they're at home hosting Fresno State. Fresno State's the better team, but New Mexico is going to be able to feast offensively. And I really like what I see from this team, which was projected to be one of the worst teams in FBS, and they are still bad, and they're bad on defense, but this quarterback is incredible, Devin Dampier, and I really like what I've seen from their team. They fight, and they they hold up in the trenches. They held up just fine against Arizona and against Auburn for 3 quarters. They held up just fine in the trenches. They were getting stops. They were holding Auburn to field goals. And so I took plus 16.5 with New Mexico. And one other one that I'll just throw out there, I think there's a lineup already, but I know there is because I bet it. In one of the late games, Boise State plays Portland State at home. And Boise State,
the Coffers.
And I took 31.5 immediately as soon as I saw it. I would play this up to 41.5.
There's no way they're fielding a real roster. There's no way.
Well, they canceled their game against the University of South Dakota last week because of an outbreak of the flu and whooping cough, and now they're playing at Boise. I mean, this is all systems go for Boise, right? Boise still has a chance to represent the G5 in the playoff. I think that they're showing at Oregon, although it didn't result in a win on the field. All they had to do was lose by 17 or less, and no matter what they do the rest of the season, no matter what Liberty does the rest of the season, I think Liberty could go undefeated, and it won't matter because everyone saw how they performed against Oregon in the bowl game last year, and they don't want that. Yeah. They're going to put Boise in with a loss no matter what against a 12-0 Liberty team, and Boise is going to run hard in this one. Genty, I mean, I don't even know, 250, 300 yards. He could run wild all night, and the backups are going to get snaps, and they've just shown that, I mean, they're so dominant at home. And Portland State, it's just not going to be a fair fight. So find whatever line you can on Boise State and crank it up because they're going to probably put up a 55 spot.
Yeah, no, I don't hate that look at all, honestly. And I on the group of 5, I think Liberty's going to got one, just given the state of the team. I think that they'll lose a game, and that game will be what they are, knocked against because their schedule just isn't difficult.
It'll be this week.
Yeah, it could be this week when the Pirates, they go to town. All right, so for me, best bets from the show, we got Michigan under 46.5. Louisiana, we'll call it 3 at home against Tulane. Clemson under 48. Arizona State 3.5. That's minus 115. ECU plus 7.5. BYU plus 7.5. A lot of dogs again. These dogs seem a little bit better, but and yeah, that's it for me. So Duck, and we got one more. Let's hear it.
Every year, Navy plays their best football against Memphis.
Yeah, but we need a 10, though. I already bet that, but we'll talk about it really quick. So if 10 pops, I'm in on Navy. I need 10 though. I already bet it.
Yeah, I already bet it too, and it was a number that's no longer available, 12 and a half. But yeah.
So we'll do the quick and skinny here on Navy Memphis, because this is I went on AAC preview with actually next week's guest, Buck Metrics, and
great guy. Buck Metrics is wonderful.
So he asked me, he goes, pick an upset in the AAC like that throughout the year. And like it was for the show, so I like was feeling like frisky. I was gonna take like a lame one. I was gonna shoot for it, and I go, well, Navy's gonna beat Memphis. They always play hard against Memphis. This is always, and not to mention they play FSU. They get their big win, even though FSU isn't very good. It's still a big win there. Navy last year, I don't have the notes up in front of me, but Navy last year, if I remember correctly, led in the game against Memphis, ran for a boatload of yards, and nearly won the game outright. And I still don't think this Memphis defense is super fixed, to be quite honest with you. So I do think Navy could contend yet again here. This is like a perfect spot where Memphis drops an egg.
Very
but
much.
You give your thoughts if I missed any.
No, absolutely. We have a dream scenario here where Memphis is 3-0. They beat Florida State in a game that they certainly had circled. And if we just pull up Memphis here real quick.
Here, wait, I'll go. Memphis last year against Navy, 28-24 at home. In that game, they were outgained. Navy ran for 299 yards. They went 0 for 2 on fourth down. They lost 2 fumbles. I believe one was in the red zone too. They lost the game by 4. And I believe Memphis, I got to pull up the box score now, but I believe they got like a goal line stand at a point that won them the game.
Yeah, and I mean, Navy ran for 6 yards a carry. They missed a field goal. They were stopped on downs. At least two times they were stopped on downs, and they had a late fumble. I mean, Navy completely outplayed them. 4th and 6 with 9 seconds to go in the game, and Navy couldn't punch it in.
I'm reading the Navy marched down the field to the Memphis 15 on 4th and 6. Ty Lavatai completed a pass to Jane Umberger. The call on the field was a first down, but it was overturned after a review. So they would have had first and goal at I imagine the 3 or something. Yeah,
it was. Yes. It was either complete, incomplete, or did he get the first down or not? I forget what the scenario was, but then Navy would have had another snap to get it into potentially get it in the end zone. And that line was 12 and a half, 13 and a half. And Navy, year in and year out, they play Memphis very tough. And that was a much worse Navy football team. And the Mids they've had a bye, so they've had a couple weeks to prepare. Memphis is off a huge emotional away game, and now they got to get back on the road again and go to Annapolis. Navy all day for me. Last team for me that's in the money line underdog round robin parlay, in addition to a spread play for me.
Hell yeah. All right, Duck, I appreciate the time, man. For me, you can get all the early read plays in the Google Sheet, which is in the podcast description. You could also sign up for Rithmm to make your own sports betting model. You do that in the podcast description as well. You follow all my plays in real time, like that Navy one on my betstamp at RW33. I'll be back in your podcast feeds Thursday morning with an underdog round robin of my own, some updated thoughts, some injury news, and some more college football analysis. Duck, I appreciate the time, my man. We'll have to have you on again before the end of the season. Until Thursday, we will talk to you guys later.